fast fashion, and its popularity has exploded in recent years. In fact, I'm willing to wager that at one point or another, you've come across at least one of these videos.
Holy shit.
I will even up my stake and say that at least one article of clothing in your closet came from a fast fashion brand. See, brands like H&M, Zara and Fashion Nova seem like they appeared out of thin air and with a rather interesting, if not revolutionary, business model. The main idea behind fast fashion is this: you replicate recent high fashion trends and designs, mass produce them at lower costs, and quickly bring them to retail. And if you think about it,
Uh-oh. Did I say that or just think it?
this strategy makes a lot of sense. Essentially, the system is designed to take maximum advantage of demand while it's at its highest, and all you have to do is do it fast. And to say that it has paid off will be an understatement. Take Zara's parent company, Inditex, for instance. This clothing behemoth boasts of over 7,000 locations, 11-figure revenues, and has earned its founder billions.
The chairman of H&M is the 28th richest person in the world, and the co-founder of Zara is the 4th richest person in the world.
But such meteoric success is never without controversy, and the fast fashion industry has been accused of relying on outsourced, often underpaid labor, poor working conditions, and wasteful, resource-intensive manufacturing processes. However, despite all this, the industry is projected to surpass 200 billion by 2030.
It's absolutely crazy. The figures that I have seen estimate that by 2030, the industry will expand by an additional 60%.
So, all this then poses an interesting question. Just how did fast fashion, in an age of eco-friendliness and sustainability, become so popular? And perhaps more importantly, what is the true cost of the industry?
Today, the textile industry is valued at about $3 trillion.
We buy a lot of clothes in this country,
We have new garments coming into the stores almost every day.
and we're able to do that because clothing is incredibly cheap these days.
You smell that? What is that?
Fast fashion is the commerce of very inexpensive clothing.
Cheap enough to throw away without thinking
Yes.
about it.
Somehow, fast fashion companies are massively profitable.
You smell money.
But there is a high cost to fast fashion.
Some 400 dead, hundreds still believed to be missing.
Media in Bangladesh say an 8-story building has collapsed near the capital of Dhaka.
Rescue workers are racing against time, searching.
Hundreds are dead, hundreds more might still be buried alive.
Someone saying, chop off my leg and pull me out.
1,000 people died. No one said a thing.
Everyone knows, but nothing changes.
Let me ask you a question.
How many of you guys often shop at high-end fashion stores like Gucci and the likes? If you do, then please raise your hand. Now, I don't mean to, as the kids who put it, throw shade, but the truth is, guys like us may never be able to shop on the premium aisle of a fashion store. And that's where fast fashion comes in. See, for a fraction of the price, you can get a shoe that looks like a Gucci, feels like a Gucci, but in the end, it's not a Gucci, not in quality or price. Well, especially not in price. This is referred to as the democratization of high fashion. It is the production and distribution of cheap fashion items on a massive scale that's allowing individuals like me and you, since you never raised your hand, to participate in an industry from which we would otherwise be excluded. Fast fashion retailers do this by knocking off other brands in mass. Now, an important point to note here is that these brands create knockoffs, not counterfeits.
Knockoffs mostly are not counterfeits. People tend to conflate them, but they're not the same.
This is a counterfeit. It copies the symbols of the brand that made the original.
So counterfeits are typically illegal.
Knockoffs, on the other hand, just resemble the design of the original.
You might be thinking, does fast fashion really democratize high fashion, or aren't customers worse off by getting lower quality designs and fabrics?
Now let me offer this as a rebuttal.
And you are right, but also wrong. See, what fast fashion does is avail to the people the feeling or the aura of high fashion. So, while you may not be able to buy the shoes that look like socks, you can get Zara's knockoff of the same and get the feeling, if only for a couple of days. Now, however flimsy it may seem, the fast fashion industry is built on this principle, if I can call it that. And it's not just about the industry's ability to democratize fashion, as it were, but also its capacity to keep up with current and emerging trends. And to do this, brands like Zara and Fashion Nova employ a system referred to as Quick Response Manufacturing, or QRM. Just to put things into perspective, legacy brands can take up to 2 years to produce designs which are released seasonally. These companies spend their time creating designs, sourcing fabric, and manufacturing and distributing in bulk. On the other hand, it can take a company like Zara only 4 weeks to design, produce, and deliver a garment to the market. To do this, the company keeps raw materials handy and reserves up to 80% of its production capacity for in-season adjustments. Doing this gives the company a sort of dynamic production process, if you will, and as such, once a certain design becomes hot in the street, Zara gets to work and those designs are brought to market while demand is still running high. So instead of releasing 2 collections a year, the company can design and distribute up to 20.
Zara launches 65,000 new products every year. Traditional manufacturers normally have closer to 5,000, so that's over 10 times the number.
And if you think this is crazy, then you've probably never heard of the ultra-fast fashion retailers who, surprise, surprise, are even speedier. Take a company like Shein, which seems to be based solely online, and especially on TikTok. Now, there isn't a lot of info about the company's operations, which is a red flag by the way, but some estimates say that they have a design to retail style of just 1 week. And Shein isn't the only one. You also have guys like Fashion Nova who release 600 to 900 styles every single week.
Instead of 2 seasons a year, we practically have 52 seasons a year. So we have something new coming in every week.
But all this is done to serve a purpose, to serve a need. Now, I know you're like, yo, that need he's talking about is definitely profit. And to some extent you are right, but there's also another need, a need for variety. And this need is largely driven by social media. Let me ask you this. How many pictures have you posted on the gram this past week? And in how many of those pictures have you worn the same outfit? See, my point is that social media has allowed the average consumer to document their life and style. And with the rise of influencer marketing, fast fashion labels are strategically placed to repeat. Due to social media's visually driven nature, fast fashion brands can partner with celebrities and influencers, both big and small, to help influence how normal people think about their everyday clothing choices. So, by doing this, the apparel industry is able to stimulate demand for clothing that people don't need and otherwise will never buy. The best examples of this are the so-called fashion hauls. These are usually videos on TikTok or YouTube where creators receive, try on, and review large quantities of clothing. See, these videos are popular mostly because shoppers can get a more accurate representation of clothes they might purchase as opposed to images on a website. However, it can easily encourage overconsumption with shoppers buying more than they need in a bid to keep up with the trend. And all this is made possible simply because clothing is extremely affordable. See, the average American buys 68 new articles of clothing each year. These clothes are worn less than 3 times, and some are never even worn at all.
It's very typical for the fashion-forward buyer to never wear an outfit that they purchased. You will wear something once or twice, or maybe never.
Moreover, studies show that we're discarding clothes twice as fast as we did 15 years ago, and all of this is because of how affordable clothes have become.
If you actually go to a store and you benchmark the price of a garment over the last 20 years, you will find that it's actually a deflationary product, i.e. the price has gone down over time.
Now, you can make solid arguments on how affordability is good or bad, depending on how you see things. But the fact is, clothes today have become disposable commodities akin to plastic carrier bags rather than keepsakes.
There's an article in Printers Ink, which is the leading advertising trade journal of its day, by a very famous copywriter named Ernest Elmo Calkins. He's a grand old man of the art of writing advertising copy. It was an article called Consumptionism. In that article, he says there are two kinds of products. Okay, there are the kind that you use, like washing machines, cars, and so on. Things that you buy and use for a long time. And then there are the things that you use up, like chewing gum and cigarettes, other perishables. He said, consumptionism is all about getting people to treat the things they use as the things they use up.
And it makes a lot of sense. Will you get these shoes for $715 only to wear them twice? Or will you get these ones from Zara with the same design but only cost $60? See, fast fashion labels are the only ones that can cater to the growing demand for new, trendy clothes, but at an average price point. However, despite how cheap fast fashion commodities get, the true cost of the industry is always going to be high. Despite boasting of super effective supply chains, the fast fashion production process is unsurprisingly wasteful and extremely damaging.
Per one part, 1 ton of fabric, as we call it, 200 tons of water are polluted.
As an example, let's take a synthetic petroleum-based fabric like polyester. Now, polyester accounts for around 50% of all fiber production, and it being petroleum-based means that it's not biodegradable. Moreover, to help the fiber retain color, manufacturers have to employ toxic chemicals which can cause lung issues and other health problems. And guess what? Once the polyester is combined with other materials, it becomes virtually impossible to recycle. And apart from the environment, another victim of fast fashion is creativity. See, designers working for these labels usually don't have the freedom to create truly unique designs. The system, it only works if designers copy other designs and just create a few differences here and there.
Everything is engineered to minimize time loss. It's so obviously a case of copy and paste.
You could even argue that fast fashion precipitates the death of small designers. However, the most heartbreaking price of not just fast fashion but the clothing industry in general is the human cost. And perhaps the most famous and gut-wrenching example of this is the 2013 Rana Plaza tragedy, which left more than 1,100 people dead and injured 2,600 more. The plaza housed shops, a bank, and numerous sweatshops, and it was a disaster waiting to happen. See, the building was constructed on swampland. The owner is accused of ignoring an engineer's warning that the building was unsafe. Structural cracks in the building had been discovered, prompting the shops and the bank to close immediately, but not the sweatshops. Survivors report that on the morning of April 24th, there was a power outage. The generators on top of the building were turned on and the building collapsed. In the coming weeks, rescue workers will comb through the debris, trying to pull survivors from the rubble. Some could only be freed by amputating limbs.
I was hearing the scream from the rubble, someone saying, "Chop off my leg and pull me out."
Among the rescue workers was a young volunteer called Hassan Himu, who helped rescue dozens of people and also move the dead. However, 6 years after the disaster, Himu, considered to be a hero by many, poured kerosene on himself and proceeded to set himself ablaze, so he could not forget what he had seen. After the disaster, retailers pledged to ensure safer working conditions. Moreover, changing consumer attitudes pushed them to adopt more sustainable production processes. And the key word here is sustainable. So, to this end, brands like Zara and H&M have come up with sustainable lines of clothing titled Beyond Life and Conscious. These lines are often marketed as responsibly made, recyclable, reusable, and sustainable. However, critics argue that these measures are just attempts at greenwashing, which refers to when a company tries to portray itself as being eco-friendlier than it actually is. Take viscose, for instance, a fabric which is marketed as an eco-friendlier alternative to synthetic fibers like polyester and nylon. See, most brands will be quick to tell you how viscose is sustainably and responsibly made from wood pulp. And to be honest, it sounds great. Turning wood into hoodies, it sounds like a miracle. However, what they won't be ready to tell you is how toxic and shockingly wasteful the whole process is. Now, because we don't live in an age of miracles anymore, turning wood into fabric involves a cocktail of some of the most poisonous chemicals you can find. And among the most poisonous of them all is carbon disulfide, or CS2, which has been linked to a myriad of health issues including infertility, heart disease, articulation problems, and nerve damage. In fact, these chemicals are so dangerous that viscose production is banned in a lot of countries, and in places where production is allowed, hazardous waste is often released into the environment, leading to the contamination of farmland and water sources. And sadly, these attempts at greenwashing are even more rampant than you may think. Take this jacket from Zara's Join Life collection, which is made from recycled polyester. However, once the plastic is combined with other materials to make fabrics, it becomes virtually impossible to recycle. That jacket will likely end up in a landfill after only a few wears. And it doesn't stop there. Remember those horrific working conditions the industry was accused of perpetuating? Well, they're still happening, but by contracting so-called middleman factories for the production of clothes, fashion retailers can simply pin the blame on these middlemen if anything goes wrong. So, what does the future hold for fast fashion? Well, it's hard to say. Some studies predict that revenue growth in the sector will slow as sustainability becomes a hot topic. But allow me to put forth some unsolicited opinions. To me, fast fashion is more like fast food. Everyone talks big about how responsibly healthy they eat, but quarterly earnings always paint a different picture. As such, I would argue that retailers may see some growth because the truth is, as consumers, we are almost conditioned to buy things. Always. In fact, this principle has a name: consumerism.
This orgy of Christmas shopping proves America is back. We are once again, yes, oh yes, we are once again spending money we don't have on things we don't need to give to people we don't like.
But it's not all doom and gloom. See, the fast fashion business model is designed to reward brands with the lowest price, and while a $1 bikini sounds like a bargain, it's almost always guaranteed to feature lower quality designs and fabrics. So, as the quality of clothing continues to degrade, consumers are likely to seek alternatives, but not before the damage is done. Hey, remember when I asked you to raise your hands? To do then, please raise your hand. I'm curious as to how many of you actually did.